Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us wherever you are and on whatever platform you're listening on. I greatly appreciate your continued support as we continue to grow our community, as well as continue to grow this podcast. Now, today's episode is one that is personal to me, but also one that I would like to be more well-informed about. I'm not as well-informed on this topic as I would like to be. I'm speaking as somebody who is half Mexican. I am part of the Latino community, but I'm not as involved or maybe as aware of the issues that are within that community as I know I personally would like to be. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to hit on a few different things from Latino coaches, the Latino community, and the role of basketball, as well as growing basketball within that community. And whether this topic affects you directly or you just wish to broaden your own cultural awareness, I think there's going to be plenty to be learned through the discussion of this topic. And so to help bring insight and their expertise into this topic, I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Lucas Ramirez. Coach, how are you today?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to getting into this topic and discussing this issue. It's more of a cultural issue, but it's completely relevant and very relevant, especially in some of the communities that I know some of our listeners are in, as well as I know I personally am in. So, Coach, let's go ahead and start with an introduction to you about your journey. Where's basketball and coaching taken you? Where are you at now, and what's the journey been like in between?
Yeah, no, for sure. Where to begin? It's flown by. But yeah, for me, basketball is one of the earliest memories, of my childhood. I was born in San Jose, California. My father, Ed, is from El Salvador. My mother, Tony, is from the United States. So blended family in that regard culturally, which is one of the greatest blessings I've had to be born into. Spent some time growing up in my childhood, about 6 years in Cedar Park, Texas, about 3.5, 4 years in Franklin, Tennessee. And then as I entered middle school, we moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. My dad kept getting different jobs in the business world, and we followed. But very grateful to again kind of have that blended cultural family, and then also being able to live in different parts of the country throughout my childhood. Was really beneficial for me, just meeting different people and seeing different parts of the world. But basketball wise, super early memories, just being a little kid and seeing the tail end of Michael Jordan's career and just playing all those Michael Jordan DVDs and just falling in love with basketball through him and didn't look back ever since then. Always been a fan, played growing up, and then as my high school years winded down, my playing career ended or when it should have. I was done playing the game. So as soon as I graduated high school, I went to Horizon High School in Scottsdale, Arizona. Had a great experience there and was fortunate to actually teach and coach there for a couple of years. But upon graduating, I knew I wanted to stay involved with the game and hit up my AAU coach, Mike O'Gwin, who's the head coach of the North Canyon Rattlers in North Phoenix. And he also runs the Arizona Rebels AAU program and their training program they have. And, it's one of the longer established, well-respected clubs here in the Phoenix area. And I dove right in. He was crazy enough to let me coach a freshman team at the age of 18 and assist with the varsity and, coach with his AAU programs, boys and girls from, kindergarten all the way to unsigned seniors. And get my feet wet with the player development program. So, I was running around like crazy, having a blast, thought I knew everything. And when I started but I really didn't. And just had a blast really getting my feet wet, without him, without Coach O'Gwyn believing in me and the relationship that we built when I played for him as well, without any of that, I would not be where I'm at today. And I owe a lot of everything that I've been able to do in my short time coaching to all the great people that I've worked for, with, people I've watched from afar. I mean, it's all about relationships. And, doing that with him for 4 years, he gave me a lot of responsibility and a lot of room to grow. And through that, just meeting a lot of people in the basketball community, whether it be here in Arizona or the West Coast or around the country. And I was able to build a great friendship and relationship a couple of years into my coaching career with a guy by the name of Matt Gordon, who's was the longtime head coach at Phoenix College. He's one of the best coaches in the country. He's won a national championship at PC. Just had a tremendous run for about 15 years. And I was lucky enough after 4 years at North Canyon and on the AAU side to get involved with him at the junior college level as an assistant. So I was teaching high school now at this time. I graduated from Arizona State, and then spent 2 years with him as I was finishing up at ASU and going into my first year of high school teaching at Horizon High School. So I was teaching during the day, then we have practice at night, go out and recruit or scout, whatever it might be. And again, giving me that kind of entry level, get my feet wet to see what the college level was like. And again, he gave you as much responsibility that you wanted and that he felt that you could handle. And doing that at the junior college level was just eye-opening, because you realize, one, if you don't know how good JUCO's basketball is, you see right there how it should be done, through him and his program, and just all around how great of a level it is if you do it the right way. So spent 2 really terrific years there. Was lucky to be just be a fly on the wall on that staff, quite honestly. And even then, just learning a little bit more, getting your feet wet with different things, building relationships at different levels, whether it's high school or college level or other junior college coaches, as well. And then after 2 years there, they finally were able to convince me to come back home to Horizon High School, where I was teaching. And I joined the coaching staff of Arizona Hall of Famer Jerry Connor. Jerry Connor coached at Shadow Mountain for a very long time. Most notably was the high school coach of Mike Bibby. But he had numerous other tremendous programs or teams, and coached a lot of players that went on to play at the next level. Working for him was such an honor, and just learned a lot about how to treat people the right way. And I mean, I can't speak enough to how great of a human being he is. He was been coaching for a long time. He's in his 70s. So for me, being the only teacher on staff on campus, a lot of responsibility from a logistical and organizational standpoint, which really helped prepare me for my head coaching position that I'm in now. And then also too, on the court, a lot of coaching responsibilities, really helping him in any way I could. So just a really, really great experience there. I mean, the alma mater, always great being involved there. And then, fast forward 3 years, here we are presently. I got hired in March at Saguaro High School, which is just another school down the road here in Scottsdale. And again, great opportunity, tremendous school, great athletic department, great administration from the top down. Super excited to be a part of, that program and at Saguaro. And, we're really looking forward as a staff, to have, this season ahead, hopefully, fingers crossed, with everything going on in the world. But, that's kind of my long-winded ramble on my career. You know, I've had different opportunities as well, cups of coffee with some other AAU programs, some international stuff. Spent a lot of great time just with a lot of great people, and it's about relationships. You know, it's about who you know, and not only that, but you know, what can you take from them genuinely, from a friendship to what knowledge you can take as a coach and as a leader, and just everything in between. So I've been very fortunate, and you know, looking forward to what's next, and you know, who I can learn from next, and you know, keep building and keep going.
Yeah, and you brought up relationships, and it sounds like one of the other things that you took from each position was you learned along the way, but also you were present in that moment. You know, whatever position you were in, it seems like you were fully invested in that position. You didn't have your eyes elsewhere or anything like that. You were fully committed to the task that you were doing, and making the place that you were at and the obligation, the job description that you had, fulfilling that to the best of your ability. And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities when people know that, hey, when this guy or this girl is working at my spot, they're committed to doing that job, and they're going to do the absolute best they can. And if they do end up going somewhere else, then that is what it is. But I know that I have them if they're with me. And I think that's something that is really important. And it seems like you definitely kind of have that mentality.
For sure. And I'll tell you this, it's something that I grew to learn, though, because if I'm being transparent and real, you know, when I started out, I didn't know any better. You know, I was just a hungry young guy. Luckily, I'm still young for now. But you know, when I started out, my focus was just, you're right, making the most of where I was at. A couple of years in, I became a little more hungry to try and get to the next level, and you know, try and really push as hard as I could to find a spot at the college level or wherever that next step might be, right? But over the years, I grew to appreciate and learn from experience, and see that your next opportunity is based off of the work that you do in the job that you're in presently, but also too, I also learned that oftentimes the next job or the next situation that you're so desperately looking for kind of organically just comes together. You know, a bunch of coaches, myself included, throughout the years, always pressing at the end of every year, trying to figure out what's that next jump, what's that next step, is there something next, what is that? But just learning to appreciate the people you're with, where you're at, and then if you do the best job that you can, the next thing will open up the way it's supposed to. The Phoenix College job, I had no idea that I was going to be getting that job. That just happened from an organic relationship. The job at Horizon, wasn't looking for it. It wasn't on my radar, but it was based from a relationship that I've had. And people that I knew. The job at Saguaro, had no idea the job was going to open, had no idea that this is what was next. But again, it comes down to timing, the relationships that I had, and other opportunities, other brief college opportunities I've had, have all been from just organic relationships that you genuinely have built. But again, something that I think as a young coach, you do learn, though, over time, to kind of appreciate relationships and where you're at in the moment.
Yeah, 100% agreed, and enjoying where you're at, and just making sure that you're learning at every opportunity that you're in. And I think the best opportunity for that learning is to make sure that you are fully committed at the position you're at, fully paying attention, giving it your all, and getting the most out of that experience. And then wherever the journey takes you from there is wherever it takes you. Absolutely. So before we get into our topic, one of the things I do know about you is that you are affiliated with different organizations. There are connections that you've built, not only for the jobs that you've had along the way, but we talked about your stops that you have at AAU, and you currently have your position in high school. And I know that you're also involved in a couple other organizations. So from your experience, Why is it so important for both young and experienced coaches to stay connected and stay in these coaching networks?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, not to kind of keep reiterating the same thing, but I think it's just so important. It's just relationship based,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what you can gain from another person, whether it's your principal, a fellow teacher, a coach of another sport, or coaches you work with. You know, there's so much that you can learn and grow, not just about basketball, but about leadership and just how to treat people the right way. And every stop I've been, whether it be the AAU level, whether it be the high school level, the junior college level, even dealing with some international basketball experiences. I mean, you're able to appreciate, learn, and grow. But I've learned more from people too that I never would expect that I would learn from, whether it be colleagues, teachers, fellow teachers, building administrators, coaches of other sports, like I mentioned before. One of my dear friends, he's grown into my dear friend. He's the head football coach at my former school. His name's Ty Wisdom. Yes, we've built a great friendship, but I learned so much just watching him run a football program.
Yeah.
And how the structure, the organization, the model of it. I mean, everything from the top down. I owe a lot of what I do to him as well. Just from watching from afar, asking questions, picking his brain, and also just seeing how leaders lead. I mean, leaders are not just coaches. I mean, just those people that help keep the wheels in motion. We have a great at my last school at Horizon. We have the head of the maintenance department, a guy by the name of James Watson. He's been there forever, since when I was a student to present day, and even predates me. Just the way that he goes about his day-to-day business, how he treats people. I learn something every day from him, and those are just a few examples of different kinds of people that you can learn and grow from. No matter what organization you're affiliated with, no matter who you're working with, doesn't matter what level, there's so much that you can gain just from watching others and genuinely trying to connect with them.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point about how, leaders are leaders. And if you want to learn about leadership, you can learn it from somebody, if you're a teacher in your building. I know I've learned a lot about leadership just from watching other teachers conduct their classrooms and like you mentioned, with coaches of other sports. And there's just so much that you can pick up on if you're willing to, like you said, commit to those relationships, build those relationships, take the time to get to know people, because there's so much that you can learn from others. And it's not just necessarily with basketball coaches, but any of the various organizations that somebody might be a part of. There's always things that could be learned that could apply on the basketball court or to a basketball program in general. So yeah, 100% agree with you there. Okay, so our topic today is going to be focused on kind of Latinx coaching, basketball within the Latino communities. And I know that our conversation isn't going to speak for basketball, worldwide or even nationally in terms of what the experience is like, but we can talk about it within our own experience in Arizona and the things that we see, and this might be helpful to those listening. So we're going to start in a broad sense. So from your experience, what are the successes, and then what are also some of the issues or challenges that are currently ongoing within the Latino coaching community?
Yeah. I mean, such a really great question. First and foremost, just from my perspective, and again, I know this doesn't fit everybody, but for me, when I started, I really didn't have anybody to identify with in the coaching community. You really didn't know of any Latino coaches. None came to mind. Now, the further I got in, a couple years in, then I realized that, Frank Martin at South Carolina, he's Latino. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, I've never been able to make that connection before and see somebody at a high level, just be somebody that you can connect with based on, hey, that person looks like me, or that person, has a background like me, and that in itself is just inspiring, and it's good motivation, and then kind of from there, when I was doing my undergrad at Arizona State, I was trying to just grow and learn and pick the brains of as many people as I could have. And so I reached out to the coaching staff at that time at Arizona State and said, hey, can I come watch a couple practices, when I can, blah, blah, blah. And, I reached out to their, at the time, I believe he was, at that moment, I believe he was director of basketball operations. His name is Jason Ludwig. And it's kind of funny, just got off a phone call with him. But he said, yeah, man, no problem at all. And just let me know what days you want to come by, and, we'll make it happen. I'm like, great, this is awesome. So then I happened to be just bored one day, probably in class at Arizona State. Don't tell any of my professors. And just scrolling through the web, and I looked at his bio on the Arizona State athletic website, and I see there that it says, oh, Jason Ludwig, has created the Latino Association of Basketball Coaches. And I was like, man, no way. Like, wow, I never would have known if I didn't happen to stumble upon, his bio. And from there, I remember reaching out again to him saying, hey, man, like, I'd love to learn more about this, find a way to get involved, and so on and so forth. So it kind of started with he started it with small luncheons at the Final Four every year. And each year it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you kind of looked around the room and you realized, well, heck, there's a lot more of us than we realize, whether it be Division I head coaches, assistants, support staff positions, Division II, III NAIA coaches, high school coaches. Mm-hmm. You just didn't realize there was that many of us out there, right? And so through the association that Jason's started with his vision, it's really come to fruition, and it's as large as it's ever been. That's been one of the projects that we've been doing during this COVID quarantine time is outreach and getting the word out and social media and everything. But the whole long-winded answer to your question, what are areas of growth and what remains? Well, we've been able to witness just seeing that more and more numbers of coaches, kind of getting connected with us, growing with us. So you're definitely seeing growth in that regard. And even if you look at the highest of levels, when Jason first started the association, at the time, the only head coaches that were Latino, Frank Martin, and then Orlando Antigua was also a head coach at the time. He's now an assistant again. But now, there are 4 Division I head coaches that are Latino. There's a handful of Division II, a plethora of Division III, and you go down the chain, especially the high school level. They're everywhere, all around the country. As the number of Latinos or Latino or Hispanic American numbers continue to rise too. The numbers are going to keep growing, right? So those are the positives. What growth can still continue, and we've talked about this before, a bunch of us, is, what can we do to continue to help grow the game, within our own Latino community. And again, it's just outreach and reaching coaches all across the country, and for that matter, reaching coaches all across the globe, that can connect with us, and find ways to network, build those relationships, maybe help create opportunities. But a point that was, has been made the past couple years, especially when we get together for our luncheon, we've been fortunate enough to have Frank Martin talk to us. We've been fortunate enough to have, all other Division I head coaches talk to us, of a Latino background. But the discussion, though, continues. We need to have people that look like us and can relate to us also be in other positions of power too, whether they be administrators, principals of high schools, whether they be presidents of universities, chancellors of universities, athletic directors, associate athletic directors, and that doesn't mean, hey, just because I'm Hispanic or Latino and I'm the principal of a school, I'm just only going to hire a Latino because he's Latino. But you know what? It's going to open that door for the potential opportunity if that person fits that job, fits what they're looking for.
Yeah.
But again, it's all about representation. It doesn't matter if it's Latino. It doesn't matter if it's African American, Asian American, Native American. I mean, you go down the list, women, right? I mean, you go down the list, more representation in those other areas, is probably one of the main ways that we can grow in terms of opportunity, for sure. But I mean, the game of basketball, we all know, is a global game. It keeps growing. So it's reaching everyone and people of all backgrounds. So that's been a pleasant thing to see, in my short time doing it.
Yeah, and I think that the growth of that network, I think, has been really helpful for coaches who maybe feel like they're a bit isolated, or they feel like they're the only one who's a Latino coach in their area, and they don't have anybody that they can connect with or who kind of understands their own situation. And so having a network of people for support, I think, is great. And I think you do bring up an excellent point there about the growth of the game in the Latino communities, and one of the issues, as you mentioned, is representation, and it's an issue that exists in many different areas, like you mentioned. I mean, I've had situations where I was coaching and teaching, and I've had girls and students come up to me saying, I was one of the first Hispanic teachers that they had. And it just kind of blew my mind for them to be in a predominantly Hispanic area and for them not to really have Hispanic teachers teaching them. I think that was really eye-opening for me, for sure.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because that's actually such a great point that you make, that like, because I know where you teach. I don't, people who are listening who might not know the area, but where your school is and your school population, I mean, that is, I don't know what percentage you put on it, but a very high Latino, Hispanic, population of students. And
yeah,
for
about
them
98%.
yeah, for them to say, or for some of them to have you be their first teacher that looks like them or has similar experiences like them. I mean, that is, forget athletics, forget anything about a ball going through a hoop. I mean, there is nothing more powerful than a young person, to look at someone who's leading them and guiding them that they can relate to and look up to. And for me, like, I never had a Latino or Hispanic teacher. But again, if I'm being honest, I've grown up in predominantly suburban areas. Let's keep it real. I'm surrounded by a bunch of white kids.
You and me both, Coach.
For me, when I did have those role models in my life who were minorities, I noticed, and I always thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Now, again, I have the greatest role model in my life, still in my life, my father. And, for me, that's my hero. That's, the guy I look up to. Forget sport, forget any of that. Just everything that he's been through in his life and everything he's been able to achieve since coming to the United States. I couldn't hold a candle to, I'm just trying to do half of what he's done, but again, the importance, whether it's a father figure, which could be a teacher, a coach, or anybody, right? Or a motherly figure or mother. It's important that our young people see that. And even for me, I reflect on that now more than ever since you made that point. I'm sitting here at a school, a very diverse school now, but still, I'm one of the few, and I can count them on one hand, of people that work in the building that are, minorities. And, there is a responsibility with that, especially when you're dealing with groups, and it's not their fault, but you're dealing with groups of young people who, in their day-to-day life, they aren't used to interacting maybe with those minority groups. So there's a large responsibility, no matter who you're dealing with, whether it's young Latinos or just young learners, all around.
Well, you bring up a great point that I want to re-emphasize for people who are listening to consider. Is it's almost that you don't necessarily know who you're going to be a role model to. And the reason I bring that up is because, like you, I grew up in a predominantly white area. I'm half Mexican. My dad was born in Mexico, but he moved to the United States when he was really young. And so I personally don't have very strong connections, or really any connections at all, to that part of my ancestry. But to my students who know my last name, which is Hernandez, like, I am a role model who's Mexican to them. And it's not really a role that I really identified too much with growing up. But now, because of that last name, and because I am Mexican, I represent that to the students I teach and the players that I coach. And it was never something I imagined myself being, because I myself didn't necessarily have that strong of ties to that ancestry. But it's a really good point, is you don't know like who you're going to be that role model to. You might be the role model in the sense of being like the only one that they know who went to college, or some other type of role model that you might not be aware that you're being. But like you said, with young players, they'll look up to you, and you don't know necessarily what you may represent to them. And so I think it's just really important to consider that.
No question.
So with that, you mentioned about how growing the game in Latino communities, and one of the things that you mentioned was the representation. But I'm curious, are there other barriers that you think exist that are keeping Latino players from playing basketball more? Or have you noticed that maybe there aren't, and there are more and more Latino players playing basketball? What have you kind of noticed in terms of participation rates, and if there are barriers, what those barriers might be besides representation?
Yeah, outside of representation, I think it's just having coaches and leaders that are willing to go into those predominant communities and show them the game, teach them the game. And we have a lot of people that are willing to, coach AAU club ball. Do you want to work with a top tier club program, or a big program, or do you want to roll up your sleeves and go into the inner city and work with those kids? And that's not a comment specific to Arizona. That's just in general around the country. Here in the United States, or even globally. Are you willing to give back to the game? And if I'm being honest, I can do more too. I haven't done enough. It's easy for me to say this. And it'd be easy for me to say that, and there'd be some people listening probably like, well, man, he ain't even doing it. And you know what? It's true. There's more I could do, and there's more that I want to do, and I need to take initiative and go do it. There's so much that we're busy with, but if it's something that we're truly passionate about, you can be about it and not just talk about it. And that goes for myself. I think be willing to go do those things in those communities, run the free clinics, reach out to those middle school and elementary schools, get out there and, teach them the game, show them the game, how pure it is, how fun it is. And you might not reach all of them, but hey, for a couple kids, that ball could change a life. That doesn't necessarily mean that that little 5, 6, 7-year-old boy or girl that you work with at that free clinic, doesn't mean they're going to go to the NBA. Doesn't mean they're going to go even play college athletics. But you know what? The game of basketball and what that could lead to the relationships they build in their life, the structure and the organization that it sets forward into their life that could help them in every other area. I mean, everything that I've learned, is through education and athletics, and you know, that takes care of a lot in life. Really, it was how you work with all kinds of different people, how you can lead different people, right? So, just rolling up the sleeves and being willing to give back and you know, really show the game, and because really you're showing more than game, you're showing a way of life, you know, in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, this speaks right to me, and then the areas that I work in, and the areas that I've taught in and coached in my whole career, and the the impact that the game could have, like you mentioned, about changing lives, and the memories that they have and the skills that they learn. And like you said, it's not that they're going to necessarily be playing at a high level or things like that, but the skills that they're going to learn, and the uh, things about dedication and determination and stick-to-itiveness, and all of these other skills that we want just people to have in general, can definitely be taught through the game. And what you brought up, is that one of the barriers perhaps for the growth to occur may be that coaches aren't necessarily willing, or don't necessarily have as much time maybe to go into these communities to teach the game, and to grow the game necessarily. And so if you do have a coach, let's say, who is willing to do that, they're willing to, roll up their sleeves, and they're willing to go into these communities. And I can speak on this a little bit as well, but I'll ask you first. If they're willing to go into these communities, what are they gonna need to be, you think, like, prepared for? What are they gonna have to maybe get adjusted to, or have to deal, that might be a little bit of a culture shock for them if they go into these type of communities and are trying to coach basketball and build a program?
Yeah, you know, really great question. Me personally, uh, I'll answer that by just saying, you go about it like you would going into any community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people might go into it with stereotypes or generalities, or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, if you go in with a relationships first mindset, and if you're going there for any other reason, then it's not the right reason. I mean, you want to help build relationships with them, and you want to help build a relationship with basketball to them. Like any community, every kid is different. Every family is different. It's not a one size fits all, like you said. And I think that's just how you approach any situation. I think people who've been coaching and teaching for a long time, you learn that as you begin your career too. It's everyone's different. Everyone has different experiences. So I think if you just approach it with a relationships first mindset, and if we do our job, making the game a fun, positive thing, then you've done your job, and hopefully they've taken something from it. It might not be, how to properly jump stop when you're attacking the basket, but it might just be just a positive experience that they had, and they're able to take that into something else they're passionate about, or something else that they want to pursue with their lives. So, I don't know if that answers the question completely, but that's how you just got to go about it, just wanting to impact in a positive way.
Yeah, I think if you go into that, absolutely, if you go into that with that mentality of being positive, and wanting to build relationships, I know especially in the area that I work in, I know that there's a lot with trust, I think, in the area that I'm in, where there's a lot of the players and a lot of students in the areas that I work in who maybe don't have maybe teachers who've stuck around, or coaches who've stuck around, and they kind of dipped out after a year or two. And I think that that's also one of the things to consider, is that if you go into some of these communities, especially in the communities I know that I'm in, is that there may be a little bit of apprehension. There may be a little bit of hesitation. They may want to, try you out and kind of see what you're about, and see if you're really about this and you're really going to stick with it. But then once you do, I really feel like you're going to get that buy-in, and I really think that they're really going to appreciate it, and they're really going to stick with you and kind of do everything for you. And so I think that that's something also to keep in mind as well. And if you
For
had,
sure.
go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say I agree for sure. And I will say this, though. I mean, if I know anything about, the Latino or the Hispanic community, they're going to work their tail off once they trust you. You know what I mean? Or once they know what their, what the job is at hand or what you expect of them. I mean, once you build that trust, I mean, I tell you what, a lot of hardworking groups of people here in this country, but arguably one of the hardest working groups, man. No question about it.
Yeah, and I just speak, so glowingly. It's the only population, not the only population I've worked with, but by far it's been the predominant population I've worked with my whole teaching and coaching career. And I just speak about it so glowingly because of how much I've learned from them, and how much, working with those populations has given to me personally, that it's such a rewarding experience. And one of the things that you actually just touched on, which I think is a good point to mention. And again, I'm speaking more for my own experience, and I know that some have similar experiences. But in my particular area, in the Latino communities and Latino neighborhoods, some of the parents and some of the families just aren't aware of what the commitment might necessarily be with like a sport like basketball, or they might not necessarily get what the benefit is for a child being in a sport like basketball, which takes up a lot of time. And so in a way, coaches kind of have to be a little bit of a salesman or a saleswoman, and kind of get the parents and get the families on board. So I'm curious, from your perspective, maybe in a Latino sense, but also in a broader sense, if you have those parents or those communities who don't quite understand the importance or don't quite have the buy-in into sports, is there any advice that you would give to kind of get them on board and kind of get them working on your side?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in specifically in many cases of the Latino community, I mean, you have parents who, they ultimately had to sacrifice a lot of the extracurriculars that maybe they wanted to do, to help work a job for their family, or to help care for their siblings, right? Or, whatever it might be, maybe putting what they want to do on the back burner, for the betterment of their family or their siblings or whoever that might be, in their world. And that's something that not everyone's fortunate to be able to have all the free time in the world and be able to pick and choose what things they want to pursue. And I was so spoiled and entitled to have that and have those opportunities. There's no question about it, no way around it. But I've seen it directly with players who've been in my programs at different stops where, it's not as easy on their home life. They got to work a job to help for their family. They got to take care of their younger siblings. And in some cases, in unfortunate cases, whether it be because there's no parents around anymore, or maybe there's parents busy working, or whatever the circumstance might be, they're the ones playing mom and dad to younger siblings, or whatever it be. So circumstances are different for everybody, but I mean, I also can understand why some parents might be hesitant, just based on, because in their eyes, there might be some things that are more important than sport. And in some cases, they're right. If it fits that situation. But if you're trying to convince a parent or even a kid, who might be on the fence, I mean, you just talk about the value that sports can bring to them and the betterment of their lives, kind of what we've touched on earlier, what it can bring. definitely more pros than cons if you're able to make it work, if you're able to fit it in your life, and it be a positive thing for you.
Yeah, I think that works for any community and any culture that you're in. But I know in my experience, especially with the Latino culture and the Latino communities I've been with, who really just want what's best for their child and their and the student. And if you can make that pitch, and if you can, sell it and say like, hey, this experience is going to let them do this in life, and allow them potentially to succeed in these different avenues, I think that just works wonders. Because like you said, there's a lot of sacrifice, I know, in the communities that I've worked in, that parents make. And as you probably are aware of too, that one of the toughest things is, parents don't necessarily have the ability to go to games, and they don't necessarily have to be, or aren't able to be involved as much as they would like to be in some aspects. And so I think it's something to be aware of, especially for coaches who might be going to those communities, that those parents are trusting you with their child with all of that time, and they're trusting that you as a coach are giving them something beneficial to help them succeed and go further in life. And it seems like it's a big challenge, and it's a big almost task for us to do. But I don't know about you, coach, but for me, that's kind of a exciting challenge to be tasked with, to have that sort of responsibility.
No question. It's a huge responsibility. For me, it's sometimes one that I have to take a step back and reflect for a second, and you almost kind of re-emphasize that to yourself. Like, hey, man, there's, like in our program, we're going to have 45 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's 45 kids that are depending on us as a coaching staff to do what's right by them, and hold them accountable, show them the way, in not just basketball, but in life, and be good role models. And bigger picture, in your classroom, we all have probably about 40 kids in 5 classes that we teach, or 6 classes that we teach. Sometimes some of us teach all 7 or all 6 classes of the day, or whatever it is. And that's a couple hundred kids, right, that are depending on you in a classroom setting too. And then also too, like, you're a coach in the community. You don't take that lightly. It's a responsibility. People know you in the community. It's almost astonishing. You sit there and think, oh, well, I'm just a high school coach. Well, shoot, man, I go walk in a restaurant, and someone's going to say hi to you. Hey, coach, how you doing? Hey, I'm so-and-so. My son plays tennis, at your school. But, we know who you are. Hey, how you doing? Good luck this year. Congrats. Blah, blah, blah. And things like that make you take a step back, and it's like, man, people are always watching you. And not in a bad way. It's just like, people are going to see what you do, and then take it a step even further. As a Latino coach, like, there's a bunch of us out there, but at the same time too, like, on a grander scale, there isn't that many of us out there here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can probably think of, including us two, I could probably count up a couple more handful, but there's not many of us, and so there's a magnifying glass on that. I think there's a great, like, I personally, maybe it's putting pressure on ourselves, but it's there's a responsibility for us to do well too in that position as a young Latino coach, and it's a great honor for sure. There's no question about it.
And with that, is that something that you kind of personally feel? Is that something that you're like kind of personally aware of as like you're coaching, and as you're coaching at different locations, or coaching in away games, or doing various basketball related activities? Is that something that you keep aware of? Like, hey, not only am I a coach, but I'm also a Latino coach, and people are also looking at me that way. Is that something that you're also kind of thinking about and aware of?
Well, I mean, I'm going to answer this really deeply for you here.
Absolutely.
I've always lived my life, with that in my mind is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm a Hispanic American.
Yeah.
And never to discredit, my mother and her side of the family. She always gives me a hard time jokingly. It's like, oh man, you always forget that you have a white mom, huh? And we always laugh, and I say, hey mom, I checked the box. On the. But no, I mean, all jokes aside, my entire life, I've always felt. I don't think pressure's the word.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just the opportunity to, even when I was a young kid, I always felt that immense, like, I have an opportunity to have someone have an experience with a minority that is a positive one, because it's stupid, but people have, generalities, they have stereotypes, they have, this, that, and the other. I mean, I don't know how many times in my life I've been told by somebody, wow, you're so well spoken. And
Oh boy. Yeah.
comments like that kind of blow your mind.
Yeah.
And the older you get, the more you realize how often things like that have happened. And so, yes, I mean, long answer short, forget coaching. I always kind of have lived with that. I don't know if you want to call it a chip on your shoulder. To me, it's more of like, I have an opportunity here to really show who we are as people, who I am as a person. It shouldn't define you, but it's something that you should be damn proud of. And for me, that's just kind of how I've always lived, and it's great. It's really great pride, and it
Yeah.
stems from my father. My father is always very proud of where he's come from, and what he's been able to accomplish. So for me, it's just having great pride in both my backgrounds.
Mm.
On my mom and my mother's side, and it's just an opportunity, to be a positive, to have a positive experience, to have positive interactions, to be a positive role model. So I guess when you look at it from a coaching perspective, I don't think about it. Maybe now I will, that you mentioned it. But yeah, like when I walk into a gym, I'm sure someone's like, "Oh, look at that!" That's there's a Hispanic coach there, or something like that, or definitely when they see the last name, they'll know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is great opportunity there to also be a good positive role model there.
Well, the thought that brings in mind with the comment that you mentioned that was told to you, it's almost like there's like a little bit of a balance that both you and I, as well as other Latino coaches have, which is that you don't maybe necessarily want to feel like you're being defined or defining yourself as a Latino coach, but at the same time, we also have to be aware that we have a responsibility to combat stereotypes or prejudice or injustice, whether it's from side comments that are made or things of that nature, and not being okay to let those go, but actually having to be proactive and actually squash those, because it seems like whether we like it or not, like we do represent those communities, and we do represent those cultures who maybe don't have a voice to speak for themselves, and that if there is a comment like that that's being made, that we have to do something to kind of squash that or stand up for that, because otherwise it's either just going to fester or grow, and it almost like we're okay with it if we don't acknowledge it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no question about it. There's no question about that. I mean, it's a great opportunity for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And responsibility.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And responsibility. And so I guess from a personal experience then, just to kind of follow up with that, have you you mentioned that comment, but have there ever been other situations where you've been made to feel like pointed out or singled out that you were like a Latino coach? Have there been other experiences like that, or no?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say like specifically with like, oh, you're a Latino coach, or what are you doing? You're a Latino. You can't coach basketball. You know, why aren't you coaching soccer or baseball, right? You know, it's never anything like that. I'm sure maybe people think it. Who knows? But I mean, like any of us, you know, who you know, have a minority background, you know, we've had experiences in our life where we've felt discrimination directly, indirectly, you know, and you know, those are things that we experience and that we live with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'll tell you what, though, man. I mean, to me, the most promising thing in the world is the kids we're with in the classroom and on the court or on the fields. I mean, I can't find a more open-minded, loving, empathetic group of young people, which makes me feel so confident about, you know, the future of our world.
Isn't that the case though? I mean, I thought the same thing. I've talked to other teachers and peers of mine about that, and I don't know about you, but I was thinking back to some of the things that were said or done and when I was in high school, which was only a little over 10 years ago, and some of the things that were said back then, like they just wouldn't fly today. And the amount of inclusion I feel like today, and the amount of acceptance of different, whether it's sexual orientations or those with who have other cultural differences, like it feels like it's a lot more of an accepting environment now. And I think that that's something maybe for younger or newer coaches to kind of consider, is that it seems to me that this particular generation of teenagers are very inclusive, and they seem to be very welcoming, and I think that that's great.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. It's you know, it's the reason you get excited to go to work in the morning. It's the reason, well, maybe not go to work, but it's the reason you get excited to wake up, take a shower, and sit in your living room or in your office
Mm-hmm.
if you're ready to virtually teach. No question about it. No question about it.
Yeah. And so before we hit our concluding segment, I had a couple people who wanted me to ask you this question. So, and I'm glad we brought it up actually, because we kind of talked a little bit about the stereotype. So, as in my area and in many areas, soccer and basketball, they run concurrently. They happen during the same season. I know at my district it does. And so soccer, as we know, is definitely played more predominantly by those of Latino culture. So the question to you, the pitch to you for a younger athlete is, for a younger Latino athlete, what would your pitch be to get them into basketball? And I'm not gonna say steer away from soccer. I have nothing against soccer, but to get them to maybe choose to spend a little bit more time with basketball over soccer.
Well, I would recommend, well, not I would, I do recommend that young kids, and as they develop into high school, should play as many sports as possible.
Amen.
You know, so I mean, play a fall, you know, soccer league, play a winter basketball season, play a spring baseball season, or however you want to incorporate it. That I think that's just critically important on being a well-rounded athlete. Now, when it comes to specifically high school, if I had a kid who loves soccer or whatever it might be, I'd say, hey, man, would love for you to play basketball for us during the season. Go play club soccer in the spring and, you know, outside of our season. But I think finding a compromise. I mean, I'm at a school that is a football powerhouse. You know,
Absolutely.
arguably the top football school. You know, not just in the state of Arizona, but I mean, it's one of the top schools in the country.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for football, and you know, we have a handful of football players that are in our program, and I know that football is their main sport. So I know this time of the year, late into the summer and throughout the summer, two things happen. One, we're coordinating our schedules around each other to make the multi-sport thing happen, whether you're dealing with baseball players, football players. I'm going to fit our schedule so you can go to as much as possible. And then on top of that, I know this time of the year, I'm never going to see him in the gym, and I am fine with that. I'm good with that. I tell our kids at Saguaro, I say, hey, go win a gold trophy, and then I'll see you in December. I'll still check in with you every week. I'll still text you on Friday, hey, man, good luck. I'll see you out there. But just be encouraging of everything they want to do. But I guess specifically to your soccer question, play basketball for the high school and then go play club soccer, and I'll be your biggest fan.
Love it. And that'd be a great pitch. Go play club, but give me this time. Give me this time in basketball season. This is when I need you. That's funny. Good. All right. So to wrap up, Coach, what I ask is every coach is a coaching moment of yours that you think others listening would be able to learn from.
Oh man. One moment, I would probably say this. And I was having this conversation just the other evening with my athletic director, Matt Harris. And we were just talking about our experiences as coaches and, what we've gone through. And obviously he's a great help being a former basketball coach at the collegiate and high school level, and a great mentor, built-in coach to lean on. But for me, I told him, and I would tell this to anybody now as well, if I could go back in time to my first couple of years coaching, just really, really focus on building relationships, because my biggest regret is that my first couple of years, I don't have strong relationships with those kids that I coached. And some of those kids I think could have used that and really needed that relationship. And I shouldn't have been so transactional when I coached in my first couple of years. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? Let's find a way to win. When it should have been, I want to find a way to be a part of your life, invest in you, and then let's worry about the coaching later. And it breaks my heart that I didn't do a good job doing that. And I'm fortunate to have a couple good relationships with players that I had at my first stop. But again, I went about it the wrong way. Those relationships that I invested in were our better players that we had, and it shouldn't have been that way. I should have been investing in all those kids, not the kids that were our better players, or that for me, that's a big regret that I think others can learn from. Granted, I was 18, 19, 20 years old at that time, but if I could go back in time and reflect and say one thing, because now when I learned after my first couple of years about the value of relationships, I have relationships to this day with kids from prior programs, whether it be Phoenix College, whether it be Horizon High School or AAU programs. It's the greatest thing in the world when you get a phone call from them out of the blue. Hey, how you doing? You get a text. What's going on, coach? Hope you and the family are doing well. And vice versa. I can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, like, how you been? How's the family? They catch you up, and then you go on and you see them graduate from college or compete at the next level, or shoot, some of them getting married now. I'm like, man, you're getting married? What the heck, man?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the most rewarding part. So just really focus on those relationships from the beginning.
Well, there's two parts to what you said that just rung really, really true to me. And it goes of coaching and teaching. One of the things is when it comes to teaching, and I tell this to young teachers who I've mentored before, is there's such a difference between loving to teach your subject versus loving to teach students your subject. And I think it's the exact same with coaching. There's a difference between loving coaching basketball versus loving coaching young athletes basketball, and understanding the difference and understanding the importance that we have in just growing players and growing people and building those relationships. And so that was the first thing. And then the second, which I touched on one of the episodes of the mental health series, was the idea of outcome-based love, and how some athletes feel that the love or the support that they feel from their coach or from their parents is dependent on the way that they perform, and just how kind of dangerous that is. But it's something good for us to be aware of, that if that is something that we've done in the past, that, hey, like, we might not be giving enough time to certain players who need it emotionally or mentally because they're not performing a certain way on the court. And before we know it, we're making that player feel like less of a person because they're not performing. And all of a sudden, like you said, it becomes like transactional and outcome based. And I don't think any good coach got into coaching to want to have that sort of effect on players. So yeah, that's really powerful. And I'm glad that you were able to share it, because it is a little tough to kind of mention those times where, you know, you don't feel like you were at your best. And I know, like you said, you were only 18, 19, 20, but I feel like you learned from that, and now you're keeping those relationships on the forefront right now.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
And so lastly, Coach, what I give every guest is what I call the 60-second soapbox, where they can get out their final thought, their closing idea, their food for thought that they want our listeners to hear. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor. Go for it.
Well, first off, anybody who knows me knows 60 seconds. I can't do that. I can talk all day.
Figure of speech. 60 seconds.
I was gonna say, if you have a timer, brother, man.
Oh no. I don't cut anyone off.
No, first off, I appreciate you having me. I mean, this is honestly, and I mean this sincerely. I've done a couple cool little podcasts for different people and stuff, interviews, and this is by far my most favorite. Just talking about something that I'm so passionate about, and you know, it's growing the game and really specifically talking about the Latino or Hispanic community. But no, I mean, you know, my 60 seconds, how will I spend it? I could go a million different directions here, but you know, I mean, honestly, I would say now, just the world we're in, forget hoop, forget sport, just be kind to others, be empathetic, listen. You know, sometimes we listen to respond instead of listening to actually listen. And, you know, I think we need more of that in this world. We need to hear everyone. We need to listen to everybody. We need to love everybody. You know, and, you know, just with everything going on in the world, from a worldwide pandemic to, you know, long overdue public outcries for social justice. You know, it's just important that we all come together more than ever. And it's important that we become educated on what's going on in the world, and educated about those around us, and even those that might be around us, but you know, it might not impact us. It might not impact our neighborhood or our community, but we need to be there for other communities, you know, and in any way that is, through education, through listening, and then lastly, get educated on how to register to vote, and then vote early. And that doesn't mean vote for any particular candidate, but vote for, you know, whatever speaks to you. But, you know, there's just an importance for that need in our society too. And obviously, I think anyone listening who's not living in a bubble, maybe the NBA bubble, right? You know what's going on, and you know what's going on in our society and in our world. So, you know, there's a great need for that as well. But again, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And you know, this was really fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you for those final words and final thoughts. Like you said, now more than ever, of trying to pay attention and to be empathetic, and just kind of be aware of what's going on around you. You know, I've said it a couple times. One of my mantras I try to live by is understanding that you have 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so you have, you know, twice as many eyes and ears as you do a mouth. And so do more listening, do more observing, do more educating, and I think that the world would probably be a better place if we tried to understand each other a little bit more and do those sort of things. So great. And thank you. Thank you again, Coach Ramirez, for spending some time talking about basketball, talking about the Latino community and the successes and the areas of growth that are still needed. I think this is a great discussion, like I said, for coaches maybe looking to get into those communities, or Latino coaches, or just for people broadening their cultural horizons. So thank you so much for spending some time to talk about this, and best of luck going forward.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you who listened. Greatly appreciate it as always. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.